All right, so just to follow up on the point I was making in the previous video about water being used by everyone, and we had said that um, in in Soviet times, the Soviet Russia dammed up a river so they had water for irrigation for crops, but downstream Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan suffered as a result of that. And actually, the UN has deemed this as the greatest environmental disaster of the 20th century. So it caused horrible problems in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Now, all of this really relates to the point that I have written on the board here. It's called the tragedy of the commons. And the tragedy of the commons is that if no one group controls a resource, there is no incentive to conserve it. If I don't use it, they will. So why not me? So as a result of that, we have a lot of the problems we have result from this lack of any one group having responsibility for water. And in addition to that, we have a lot of countries that are quite poor, and we had said water distribution is, depending on where you are, you might have a rainy season and a dry season, and during the rainy season, maybe you got lots of water, but then during the dry season, not so much, right? So the World Health Organization in 2010, they estimated that 1 billion, we have 7.7 billion people now, but it was approximately 7 then. 1 billion people in the world lack safe drinking water. And they went on to say that as a result of this lack of safe drinking water, 3,000 infants and or children die daily as a direct response or a direct result of not having safe drinking water. So that leads me to the next point. What is safe drinking water? Is it pure water? No, it's not pure water. So think about your water at home. Depending on where you are, you might have problems with hard water. So you say, oh, I get this, if I don't wash the bathtub or the shower once a week anyway, I build up this stuff. That's solids that are in there. So hard water have dissolved substances in there. It doesn't hurt you. It's there. So there are things that can be present in water and it's still safe for you to drink. So how do we define safe drinking water? I'm going to read this out to you. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency says that in a water contaminant, and that, having water contaminants are what make water unsafe. So a water contaminant is any physical, chemical, biological, or radioactive substance present in the water that is harmful to the human health or that degrades the taste or water color. So people don't like drinking brown water. Do you blame them? I don't. I don't want to drink brown water because you don't know what the brown is. You know something is there. So this is how they regulate it, and what they regulate, there are more than 90 contaminants that are monitored for in water to determine if it's safe to drink. Now, you're doing a lab on drinking water this week. And so that stuff in that list, on that sheet of paper, that lead, that mercury, all that stuff, these are some of these contaminants that we're concerned about. So what about that lead? Flint, Michigan. Remember, Flint, Michigan. Well, they have a lot of problems with lead, and it's interesting because what happened is that they have a bunch of lead pipes and so forth, but it wasn't a real big problem until they switched their water source. And in your test kit, you're gonna test the pH of your water, and it ends up that what they did is they went from a higher pH, less acid water source to a lower pH, more acid water source. And what did that do? It pulled more of the lead out of the pipes. I just an hour ago saw a news conference in Pittsburgh, in a portion of Pittsburgh that has lots of lead pipes in the houses and in the streets. And Pittsburgh was making a major announcement today about how they are ripping out all of these water pipes and replacing them with non-lead pipes, because Pittsburgh too has problems with lead in its water. That's one of the major contaminants. Now, what is wrong with lead? Why don't you want lead in your water? Well, it's not as harmful. It's not good for anyone at any age, but it's less harmful for you and me than it is for children who are developing. So as you're developing, if you are experiencing lead poisoning, it lowers your IQ. It will lower your cognitive skill. You will become less smart than you would have become otherwise. So it's not a good thing. Okay, so water is a solvent, and especially if it's a little bit acidic, it's going to be dissolving more solute. So that's the stuff that gets dissolved in it, like lead. So when you look at that test kit that you've got, and you look at that piece of paper, there's these numbers. It'll say, 1, 5, 10, and you say, well, what is that? And if you look carefully, there will be something like micrograms per liter, or parts per million, or parts per billion. So this is how much of the contaminant is present there. So I was talking about Rachel Carson's a little while ago, and I was talking about how she was a crusader against DDT. Now, what happened with DDT is, even when there's fogging for mosquitoes and stuff, you don't bring that much into you. But what happens is there's something called bioaccumulation. Over time, it builds up inside of you. And then in addition to that, there's another process called biomagnification. So if you are a little teeny tiny fish and you get a little bit of this DDT in you, well, what happens? You get eaten by a bigger fish. And what happens is the small amount of DDT that's in all of this food that this bigger fish is eating means that he has even more DDT in him than each of those little fish. And then what happens? Along comes an eagle, and he eats the bigger fish. And every one of those bigger fish that he eats has even more lead than the little tiny fish they were feeding on. And what happened, Rachel Carson's, that's why I'm telling the story. What happens is DDT interferes with reproduction in eagles, and it almost drove eagles to extinction. They've made a recovery, and now they're kind of everywhere. You can go down to Harmer and see them regularly down there. But this is, again, it's all about water and carrying all of these pollutants. What else happens? Okay, I better stop right here. I'm going 9 minutes.